So this 23rd session will be on the streamed applications. I was showing the list of previously released sessions, and if there is any issue with the sharing, please let me know. I will move on. I will move on to the topics, so the last session pointers and answers to questions, some news about 2023 1.2. That doesn't bring a lot, so that will be a fast review on the coming versions, and we will spend most of the time on this management of streamed applications. So let's move on. The last session was on the FlexNet Manager 2023-01, which was released in July, and the new application publisher screen. So there is here the pointer to the recording. You will get, of course, this presentation and the PDF presentation version, the PDF version of the PowerPoint in the events and webinar section of the Community Hub. Just like you will get this one, you got the July presentation, which was on 2023, and I went through each of the features of this version. And also spend time on this new application publisher screen, so you can get access to the recording, the video, and the document, which you can download from this Community Hub posting. Let's move back to the session. So there was no question in the last session, and I can move forward. There is no special news about this month. So if I open the SAM Best Practice Hub, which you will find the link for in the PowerPoint, you will get plenty of information. We're expanding a little bit, and I have expanded a little bit what is explained on the SAM Publisher, on the SAM Publisher Hub. And you will get a lot of information about the released hubs, released best practices, and again, the full list of the previous sessions that will help you in understanding various aspects of doing software asset management in the Flexera tool. Let's move on to the PowerPoint again, and let's go through the main topics of today, which is the management of streamed applications. So that's typically something which is not very easy to demo, because you need demo data about VDIs, Citrix, and so on. So I will mix some slides and a little bit of demo today, but maybe the proportion will be lower this month. So on the concept, the agenda, quickly, we will go through the concept. What is a streamed application? What is a virtual desktop? What is a streamed app, and so on. We will focus a little bit on how we can manage a consumption for the streaming technologies. It's not an obvious thing. Managing the RDS cards, for instance, or the Citrix license consumption. This is not one of the easiest thing that can be performed, but we can get the data from the licensing servers or from the management console. So I will show you that. And this will be contained in two posts that you will get, two knowledge base articles that you will get soon after this presentation. And we will spend more time on the second part, which is how we can manage the license consumption, not for the streaming technologies, not for Citrix, not for Microsoft RDS cards, for instance, but for the applications which are offered through streaming. So I will give you the details on how you can integrate the data into ITAM, into FlexNet, and how the data and the consumption is surfaced. And particularly, I will show some of the reports which are surfacing this data. So what is a streamed application? It's not new. It has been, I would say, 2 decades since people have been using Citrix and thin clients to actually run applications not directly on the machine, but on the streaming server. The goal is obviously to simplify the deployment of applications. So having a better governance on who can use what application. We don't trust so much people will install on their own computers with admin rights the right applications. That's the best way of losing control over what's happening. So many organizations have, for a while, taken the option to propose some applications to users according to profiles that they have defined and application user profiles that are delivered through Citrix, for instance, or Horizon. There are several approaches for delivering streamed applications. One is persistent VDI. Basically, this is the use of a thin client that can access a desktop. It's actually a virtual desktop. And this desktop is like a computer. I mean, if you switch off the client, the Citrix client you have, and if you switch it on again the next week, it will have all the data that you left. So this is sort of a persistent or remnant desktop and virtual computer that you can use, and the data is pertained. The non-persistent VDI is facing, more scalability purpose. The idea that not everybody is using his machine constantly. So the idea that if you have a non-persistent VDI, you can, as a user, kick off a desktop from a web UI, for instance, and this desktop will be a short time lived and will allow you to run applications. And as soon as you stop your session, it will be sort of decommissioned, and restarting the desktop will trigger actually the instantiation again of the same VDI template. That's how it's called. That will allow you to work again the next time. So this is what non-persistent VDIs are. And the third big family, I would say, in these streaming technologies is streamed applications. So basically, you have a list of icons, and you get offered the icons that correspond to your profile. Again, this is under control. This is the goal. And by clicking on an icon, you will run an application that actually will not be on your local computer. So it will not execute on your local computer, but it will run on a streaming server. So there are big players. I'm sure I'm forgetting some, but Citrix, of course, with XenLab, XenDesktop. And we have an on-premise version of Citrix and also a cloud version, knowing that in the cloud version, actually the streaming server is still an on-premise machine that you have in your data center, but the controller will be in the cloud, and the management of user accesses will be provided from a cloud SaaS application. VMware Horizon is another technology that offers VDIs, non-persistent VDIs or persistent VDIs, and eventually a streamed application as well. And finally, Microsoft, which actually is a little bit older technology, offers also some streaming technology through RDS servers. Again, you can run remotely some applications which are authorized by local license keys, license cards for the users. And AppV as well is a sort of a streaming, application streaming technology. So in the end, what I will go through today is not a step-by-step setup on how you connect to Horizon, how you connect to Citrix. So I will not focus so much on the how and on the technical side, knowing that I will give the pointers to the documentations. But I will spend more time on how the data is designed in ITAM, in FlexNet Manager, and how you can, on your side, take into account this streaming information and account it in your license consumption, and how you can recognize which are the applications which come from a streaming activity and which are the ones which are truly installed on the computers. So let's move on to the next slide, which is a small zoom on Citrix. XenApp is based on the AD groups. So you have a series of AD groups which give application assignments to users. And if a user belongs to a group, he will have access to the applications that are authorized or provided to the group. Some packages are assigned to users, and then I insist on the package side. We will see that XenApp leads to recognition challenges. Indeed, this is a managed application which has a real installation behind the scene, but you allocate packages that are basically renamed for users. So the add remove program or the name of the application will not be the classical one you would find in installing classically the application locally for a user. The packages are imported in ITAM. We'll see a little bit more how the data gets transferred, but the data will be reflected as remote applications. Xen Desktop, other technology with a slightly different user experience. The user will access a virtual desktop, and we have VDI groups defined again in Active Directory. So you manage who can access what desktop, what template in AD, and the VDI templates contain a series of applications. And as soon as the user kicks off a session, it will instantiate a session for a template, which will be persistent or not, depending on the type of license is used. So the licensing implications, we discussed about what is the technology. Yes, we can stream application. That's good news, because it allows to simplify the application management. It allows to avoid having users' computers depending on the migrations, upgrade of the application. So everything is centralized, which is nice. So this is nice, but there is a cost, or there is a risk associated to that, which is the licensing application. I'm not disclosing anything new. They're saying that using an application requires or creates a license liability, of course, and having the right to use an application, which is a little bit more subtle, also requires a license entitlement. That means if a user, given his profile or his ownership, or the fact he belongs to an AD group, can use an application, he will be, in the end, liable for the licenses which are related to this application. So that's why things could quickly be out of control. There is a nice way you can manage AD groups. So you can have parent AD groups, inheritance of rights, and so on. Very quickly, the situation could be that people have excessive rights, or have not been assigned the new right associated to that new role, for instance, if they move. And in the end, this is very important. You keep track of who can use what, and also who used what, to be sure that you are not opening a licensing risk in your use of streamed applications. Depending on the license metric, multiple situations may occur. That's one corner case, but that I've seen some customers quite stressed on. If it's a per user licensing, typically the new versions of Office 365, there is no big issue. A user may kick off the Office application from a device or another. What matters is that this user has a license, so the accessing device, I would say, has limited impact. If the licensing of the application is per device, that's a way more complicated situation. And I've seen sometimes customers under stress in their conversation with Microsoft because, for instance, if they use an Office Professional, let's say 2016, an old version not maintained, which has an interest in terms of cost, which is not a subscription, Microsoft may challenge the customer saying that this is a per device licensing, and you need to track, not only who used Office Professional or who has a right to use Office Professional on the streaming server, but you need also to understand what are the devices the users were using when they kicked off the session for Office Professional. And to be honest, this is just, I would say, a way of pushing the customers to move to the subscriptions, which have more interest financially for Microsoft. But this is, I would say, a specific use case that we have addressed. I will go through that specific use case where you need to understand your sort of worst case usage of applications which are licensed per device on the streaming servers. So implications are not so simple when it comes to licensing. And so what we need is a way to track remote usage, reflect accordingly the remote usage in the inventory view that we get from the users, but also in the license consumption. So what is the design of Flexera on application streaming? 3 cases, as I described earlier, the persistent VDIs. Persistent VDIs, it's quite simple. These are managed as virtual machines. There is a flag when we import inventory from the VDIs. And if the persistent flag is here, the inventory import will create a virtual machine. And this virtual machine eventually has applications, will behave like a VM, will eventually consume for these applications, just like a desktop would consume licenses. So this is a quite simple story when it's a persistent VDI. A non-persistent VDI is more complex. We inventory the templates. We inventory the applications which are in the templates. So you need to run the agent scan or SCCM on these templates. And once you get per template the list of installed applications, the users can eventually access to the template thanks to AD group assignments. So this is a second thing that the Citrix integration or Horizon, for instance, integration allows. You will get the users access or links between groups and templates. And since you have the links between users and templates, in the end, and groups, sorry, in the end, you get what user can use what application through which VDI template. And the design is that we duplicate the templates application on all of the devices of the assigned users, which is a way of showing the worst case. If a user has 4 devices, he may access the streaming server or the desktop, the virtual desktop from 4 machines. So he will get a remote application. So that's something called the access mode. You can recognize. So technically, we will duplicate the evidence signatures, file or installer, which were found from the VDI template, and we will duplicate on the users' machines and flag these installations as Citrix virtual desktops or Horizon virtual desktops. These are access mode types. For the streamed applications, this is a little bit the same story as for non-persistent VDIs. The user application assignments are collected through AD groups, through the Microsoft or through the Microsoft API. You will see that we have also some Microsoft 365 access mode, which are actually the remote usage that got reported by the Microsoft portal. Once we have these users applications created I did not insist, but it can be created on all of the devices of the user, or we can create a fake device, which is called a remote device, if we find no device in the inventory. So the streamed application, same story. We read the user application assignments from the AD groups. We duplicate these applications or these packages on the computers of the users, or eventually on the remote computer. One challenge is that we are duplicating package names. So somebody may name, the virtual desktop basic user level 2. In the end, it could be, so you could have an application per application assignment, or you could have an application group, bundle of applications, which is a user profile. In the end, there will be an application package to ARL application mapping, just to make sure that, and that will sometimes require discussing with the packaging team, but we are often talking about 60 or 80 applications big max. Experience shows that the Citrix application teams are not so much focused on showing exactly what they give access to. It's more about access levels and so on. So understanding what is behind the application provided through the AD group will be an important focus. And here we talk about the access modes, which are Citrix virtual apps, VMware View, Horizon, Office 365 typically can be collected through the Office or Microsoft 365 portal. And AppV, it's a little bit special case. And hopefully, this is, it won't be contradicted, but the AppV sessions monitoring is something that SCCM does. And when SCCM does AppV monitoring, we collect the data in ITAM or in FlexNet, and we correctly display the AppV usage as, again, showing the access mode equals AppV. There is no real-time AppV monitoring, for instance, from the Flexera agent. So hopefully you get the big picture, that there is a little bit more visual parts. I will actually spend a little bit of time on this on this explanation. So if you have a non-persistent VDI, just wanted to make it more visual. Here you have VDI templates. You will see we collect the list of VDI templates on screen. Each VDI template has evidences, which could be executable, so file evidences, or add remove program evidences. And the mechanism during the import is that we know which user have access to which AD groups are mapped to which VDI groups, which in the end give access to some templates. So the import will duplicate the signatures. And to be totally precise, it's not the raw signature that we duplicate, it is the ARL signatures, the one that we would see in the unrecognized evidence or in the recognized evidence page. And these signatures that will then be recognized as applications or not, they could be unrecognized, of course, will be duplicated to, let's say here, the two computers of the user. So the big thing is, and that's one challenge, understanding why a user has two applications, which were the templates and which were the AD groups that gave him access to the template. You will see there is a screen, but actually, to be totally transparent, while the end data will be easy to trace and will be correctly handled by the license reconciliation and the consumption calculations, understanding why an application finishes on the user's computer with an access mode which is virtual desktop, it could be a challenge because potentially you could have the user belonging to 5 AD groups that give access to this VDI template. So that will be the combination that you can have can be complex. To stay a little bit in the visualization on how things work for the streamed applications. this is nearly the same story, but here we're no longer talking about a true computer scan that would have thousands eventually of file evidences and insert evidence. Here we talk about packages, application package names, which are provided from the controller. And the AD group, again, same story. The user belongs to a number of AD groups. Each AD group could give access to a number of packaged applications, knowing that an application could be, WinZip 7, or could be a basic desktop that itself includes WinZip 7, Office Professional 2019, and Acrobat Reader 2023. So that's where this package remapping is important, because the import process will copy application names to desktops and laptops and users' computers, but the translation of these packages into single applications or bundles of applications, that's what I've done here. Nothing prevents in ITAM or in FlexNet to link a signature to 5 applications. You need to know which are the 5 applications. That's where the packaging team will help you. You will get an alert that says, there is overlapping evidence between multiple applications, but here, no choice. So you can reflect the, I would say, reality of the standalone applications provided through a single package to the users. And then once we have this duplication performed, we are back to normal. We will see on the users' machines, we will see installed applications and so on and so on. So here, I would like to insist on one thing, which is one challenge. Each of the machine of the user will get a copy of the authorized application, or even, VDI application. And I've seen in real cases, production servers, that there is a cascade of users. There is a calculated user, there is a last logged user that in the end is not used so much. And then you have the assigned user for a computer that you can force not to be the one that the operating system, for instance, found. And the one thing I've seen in the past is, emotion created when this duplication happens, because you could finish with Acrobat, for instance, on 20 production servers with the flag that says, I'm a remote access, because the user of the device is actually, calculated from the last admin of the server who logged. And in the end, you could see, strangely, some desktop applications, Citrix again, reflected on the production server. So that's just a little remark. How to avoid that could be to link the production servers to sort of generic users who will never appear as a Citrix user, for instance. So that's a way to avoid that these servers finish with user-related or Citrix user-related applications, just to avoid confusion. So hopefully all this makes sense. So I'm going to go back to the so the licensing requirement, we saw that already. The integration flow, to be honest, I will not spend a full hour on that. So if you open this documentation, which is referencing in this document, this PowerPoint, you have, let's say Citrix. If we start with Citrix XenApp, and here you have details, many details that explain, depending on the version, this is not exactly the same way to connect. And then you have the diagrams that show the data flow. Knowing that this is always the same type of approach, we have an agent, which is a XenApp agent, which collects data. So it's one per form. So no need to deploy multiple agents on each XenApp server on each farm. And the agent collects data. It collects a mix of data from the AD groups, which are containing the assignments. It's collecting data from the VDIs, for instance, so that there is a number of data sets that the agent collect, which eventually go to a staging database. Even if you're a cloud customer, the beacon needs to have a local database where the data would be sort of reprocessed. And then each site is about usage. And then, the data will be imported into the FlexNet Manager or ITAM database, which is what you will see in the data that you have in the web UI. So there could be multiple situations, multiple versions, and we document carefully, in this document, Citrix Cloud, which is quite similar, but actually with different APIs. So you need to connect a different way. We describe in details XenApp, and I think there was Xen Desktop a little bit later. And Horizon, which has been recently added to the list of connection that we have. It was in 2022, in March 2022. Again, you get an explanation on how to connect to the Horizon architecture, and quite similarly, that's where I was starting. You may have 10 streaming technologies. 10 times we will connect, read the data in a different way, but in the end we will remap the data in the same design, which is we basically store the who can do what, which is the big topic of streaming applications. We store from the AD groups, from the users linked to AD groups to VDIs, for instance, or to applications. And we store so the sort of matrix of potential usage. And then we have a mechanism that will sort of replicate or duplicate the applications or the signatures to the user's devices, so that in the end, you will see in the UI, you have a simple story that shows how the data gets recognized. So I'm going to connect because I will do a demo. Okay. Just ask you for a second, and then I will okay. So hopefully I will be able to connect to Flexera 1, which is a demo system. And I will maybe go through two or three more slides, but then I will show the data, how it occurs. So let's move back to the. I won't give the details, but the description, the documentation is quite detailed. And I gave some of the tables that you may have interest in getting a look if you are on premise, of course. So we have this imported remote application access, imported remote user to application access, imported VDIs. All of this will be stacked in the what we call the staging tables for inventory. And then, the data is aggregated and merged into the database that will, in the end, contain the data that you see on the web UI and that are used by the license reconciliation. VDI templates must be inventoried by the agent. Persistent VDIs must be inventoried too, of course. So that's where the demo starts. I don't have demo data for everything, so I will insist a little bit on the VDI groups and the VDI templates. So let's have a look to the data we have. And actually, it's another instance which has some. Okay, so just connecting to the instance. Okay, so let's start from what we see in the end, because that's so if I go to the let's say reports, I created a small report called all commercial applications. So if I go here, this is called commercial installations including access mode. So that's one thing that people don't always realize, which is extremely important. Even on the computer detail, if you check the applications, you will see that actually you have a mix of applications. It's not all about remotely or locally installed applications. You have something called access mode, and in this access mode you have B. That's one example here, which is probably coming from some SCCM data, and you get this Citrix virtual apps, which is about streamed applications, and you see here this is demo data that got a little bit tweaked, but in the end you get these 100,000 Creative Suite standard, which is more a mass upload to create fake data. But the idea that depending on the access mode, and you can do the exercise very quickly for yourself, you will get the transparency on what application comes from where, because that's not obvious actually. When you have nothing or local, it means it got uploaded by the classical agent or SCCM. But then you will see Microsoft 365, you will see a number of access modes, which are actually the sign that these applications are not from the inventory of the computer, but from an additional source that replicated data to these computers. So this is what we can say for the end results, the installed applications. And if you want to go one step up, you have this, remote. So I will show remote devices and virtual desktop templates. So if we start, with the core of these VDI templates, again, limited data here, but if you go on the detail of one of the templates, and the data is very partial, but you see that a virtual desktop has a number of applications. Okay, this one has no application, but classically a VDI template. I will try another one, hopefully, that has applications. Okay, so data is quite poor, but you will have recognized application on a template. You will have a number of AD groups related to this template. Here, this is not the case. You will have eventually a number of VDIs, which are reading from this template and which are instantiated, I would say. And the idea that we have and that's where there are very high combinations. That's what I stressed at the end of this presentation. You may have 50 groups accessing to 500 VDI templates, which themselves, will be delivering 500 applications each. So the combinations can lead to real challenges with the millions and millions of signatures that a massive XenApp or Xen desktop architecture can provide. So the data is here not very complete, but you visualize. If I go back to my slide, this is a little bit the visualization of what I was showing. AD groups are linked to VDI templates, which have installed applications. Unfortunately, in my demo data, I don't have a lot. And in the end, these applications will be duplicated on the user's computers with an access mode, which may be Citrix or Citrix Virtual Desktop or XenApp, for instance, or API when it comes from SCCM. And the AD groups, of course, are the key enabler for a user to access an application remotely. Okay, so that's what I wanted to show. What else could I show? So I will go back to the slides a little bit. So VDI templates are linked to users. I have other screenshots here. The non-persistent VDIs will be available in the all inventory screen, and persistent VDIs will just appear as virtual machines. And if we move to the next step, which is once we have connected the source information, once we have these remote applications or remote installations created, we need to be very careful that the licenses get correctly set up to consume this data. And you have a choice, actually. You could imagine that you have no intention to reflect the strained application usage or access rights to your license consumption. I'm not sure why you would do that. Licensing would plead for the contrary. But if you go to the licenses, if you look for this creative 4 platform, so this creative 5 design standard license, so I open this license. When preparing this exercise, this demonstration, the license was consuming 0. Why was it consuming 0? Just because in the use rights and rules, in the consumption rules, this one, you have, by default, it could be like that. So it means, license will look for local applications and calculate consumption as soon as it finds, let's say, one installation of this suite per device. It was a per device licensing. If you click on that, you get then, an additional 2 options, actually. One is, one entitlement per device owned by each user. So it reflects a little bit this worst case approach if you're on a per device licensing, which is the case here. If you were, let's say, on a Microsoft 365 or Office 365 license, you would probably take this option to say just consume for each user. And finally, an additional option, which is powerful, but we rarely had the right data to make it work. Usage within the time limit here. What it will say is that if I find a user who has remote access, but with usage attached to it, this is what we call, for instance, CAD usage. That there is a report that showed the Microsoft CAD usage. Here, the license will ignore any usage which is more than 90 days old. I would say the simplest and the most classical approach is, counting any access or counting any user, if that's a per user licensing. But be very careful that these checks and these configurations are correctly set up. I've seen customers who are so glad to have Citrix connected to their environment, but consumption on licenses was not reflecting these Citrix installations. That would show as an unlicensed installation. So normally there is a way to identify that this is under the radar, but here this is very important to get the right configuration on the license. Hopefully it makes sense, and you get the feeling. We are going from the bottom, inventory data, and we are going up to understand what is the licensing implication and how to count it. Let's move back to the presentation. So I'm going to zoom, and I forgot one part, which is important, so I'm going to go up a little bit. I spent time explaining on how we can monitor the license consumption for the streamed application, the Visio, Acrobat, and so on. I will go back to the, actually, I'm going to finish on this aspect, but then I will then spend a good 5 minutes on how we can track the consumption on Citrix, for instance, or the consumption on Microsoft RDS CAS, which is a more complicated topic. So if we start with the special case, I was describing the fact that on some per device licensing, there is a trap, which is if you use an application, if you stream an application on a server, and if you access this application, but this application has a per device licensing, and the Microsoft Office Professional is the big example and the big use case for that, you are taking a risk, and that's where this report got created, which is inventory here. So you have this application, this report that got added out of the box in 2022 R2. So if you're on premise, you won't see it if you're on 2021, but 2022 R2, we added this new report. And this new report allows, so I'm going to just run the report to start. This report allows to understand, so it will basically show all the usage for all the Windows servers. So starting point is I will see one line per user / application for the Windows servers. So that's what we call a streaming server. And here you see that this server has some usage for this user, for this application. And a quick way of understanding, if this is a true streaming server, this would be to group by streaming server. And with real customers, here you would see 500 or 600 lines, which means that we have maybe 10 products or 10 applications managed by 10 users. You will see quickly, the combination. So what the report does, it checks for on 90 days. That's important. It will check any usage found on a Windows server. And it allows to configure a remote application. So here, typically the receiver client is the typical application that will have usage. This is Citrix receiver.exe. And what the report does, if I rerun it, but in this demo data, I don't have what I need. But here you will see if a user had, let's say, usage on Citrix receiver in the last 90 days from 3 devices, and if he has usage on this server for one application which is licensed by device, that's one of the flag of the report. The report will have 3 rows for the user who is accessing potentially from 3 machines, which all have usage from a Citrix receiver. So you get here, your sort of a worst case assessment of your device application access from streaming servers. So it's a little bit complex. There is a super detailed documentation, quite detailed documentation that will explain. So you will get the details, but this is a corner case that some customers raised several times. This is a concern. How can I know which user is accessing which application from where? This is the report that will, sort of join the data from the receiver on one time on remote access applications, and from the Windows servers usage for users. So hopefully it makes sense. And I'm going to rush to the last part that I wanted to address, which is managing, and I will finish with the known challenges. Maybe I will go over by 5 minutes. Okay, so here we go. This slide is about, how do I track my Microsoft RDS CAL or my Citrix license consumption? And the big point is that it's not trivial. It's not trivial because these are not visible from installations consumptions, which means, it's not by counting the Citrix client that what is your Citrix entitlement or Citrix consumption, sorry. It's by knowing the number of concurrent access, for instance, for Citrix, that obviously nobody knows except FNMEA. We have a tool which is doing concurrent usage, FlexNet manager for enterprise, for engineering applications, or the Citrix console. And what I'm going to post on the community, so track the community, I have two integrations which were created for customer projects. One which is reading from the RDS CALs. So basically, the PowerShell is querying the Active Directory, getting the list of RDS servers, because this is one of the things that AD knows. And then it is querying each of the RDS server, and it runs an API, which is returning, I think it's called the license consumption report. And then you get a flat list of what user or what computer got what RDS call for what version. So you get, on one side, the flat data of assigned CALs. The other integration is very similar. It queries directly the Citrix API and provides the Citrix console data, which is a typical one you may have seen, which is this server has this max consumption for this product. And you get basically the peaks consumption. And the idea that these two, once you have this data, there is a second step that will be easily understood from the documentation. Second step is that we read the data and allocate users to CAL licenses, RDS CAL licenses. This is a very simple process, a business adapter that reads a list of users and allocates the users to the licenses. Or this one is allocating the servers, actually, which are reported by the console, to the licenses with the consumption, because you can force the consumption when you do a server allocation to a license. So in the end, the read step is the PowerShell. The write step, in between, there is a little bit of SQL, which will be explained in detail to do some optimization for RDS CALs. Typically, if a user has two CALs, one of 2016 and one of 2012, that's a pity, because only with one CAL he could do the same. The 2016 CAL, he would not need the other CAL license. So there are some patterns of optimization that can be applied, and then the allocation that you see in the two steps will eventually allocate to the licenses where you have active CALs, and to optimal licenses where you take away when there is a redundant CAL allocation, which would be a device end user or two versions of the Microsoft Server CAL. So that said, it will be simpler to read the solution, but keep in mind that these APIs exist, the PowerShell would be provided, and that's, I would say, an acceptable way of not calculating the consumption, but reflecting the consumption that is provided by actually the streaming technologies consoles. Okay, so I've gone through the. I will just finish on the challenges. One challenge is the combinatory. You can have millions and millions. You see here, this is the list of virtual desktop templates that I took from a real customer, 50 million, 55 million. So this is just overwhelming. Because there are multiple groups, so the same template can be linked to multiple groups, and multiple VDI device can be linked. So it can be complex, and the users, of course. So in the end, the combinations are big. The complexity of data is high, and the analysis can be challenging. Another challenge is that XenApp file evidences can get lost in the mass of not for recognition file evidence, but you get also the installer evidence that normally are the ones that you use for recognition. The packaging, which is about installer evidence, but for XenApp, will lead to unrecognized evidence. But here, this is about reasonable numbers. You may have 150 unrecognized evidence which is manageable. In a project, it will take 3 hours maybe to remap this 150 unrecognized evidence to the right applications. And the final one, which I've seen sometimes but not always, some customers seem to have a mixed mode where they have persistent VDIs, but multiple users access these persistent VDIs. So in the end, they need to have a duplication of the VDI's signature, so that they can really reflect the number of users who can actually use the applications on these persistent VDIs. So that's it for today. Thanks for attending this training and this session. I will be glad to meet you again in September, early September. Meanwhile, I wish to those who have a vacation, I wish good vacation to you, or see you soon in the next webinar. Thank you. Bye.